Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Go ahead, brother.
Don't you ever tell me to hold on. I'm not waiting.
I'm putting that on YouTube.
All right, Bob, let's talk about the resurrection body. With what kind of body will we be raised? Where apologists really like to drive the wedge in here between the resurrection of Jesus and the other resurrection myths of the ancient world is that, well, Jesus' resurrection was in the vein of Judaism. In other words, it was a bodily resurrection, whereas the pagan myths may involve some kind of apotheosis or spiritual resurrection, but that's completely different from the Jewish version of bodily resurrection. As I understand it, Paul says that it's the natural body that dies, and that Christ was raised in a spiritual body, which, reading 2 Corinthians, he of course says that doesn't intend a naked soul, but it is, of course, some kind of new divine re-embodiment, so to speak. And if you read, I don't know how to pronounce the gentleman's name, but it's Enzo, Greek resurrection beliefs and the success of Christianity, as well as even M. David Litwell on this point in Isis Deus. It looks like more or less the same was believed of these other dying and rising gods, that they were raised to heaven or brought back to life in an immortal divine body, and that this is more or less the same kind of thing with Jesus. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I think that's true, because it doesn't take an Einstein to realize what it says in 1 Corinthians 15, that flesh and blood shall not inherit the kingdom of heaven. This is the reason, strangely enough, that in the Eastern religions, they believe in reincarnation. And don't like it, right? We seem to think in the West that reincarnation is an alternative to resurrection, and it's much to be desired. That's not what they think in the neighborhood where they invented the idea, that because they see what would have to happen. I mean, do you want to live forever in a like I am becoming increasingly infirm? A couple of years ago had to use a cane to get around, but then I lost my balance to the degree that now I have to use a walker even within the house. My memory is beginning to fade because I'm I think a year or two younger than Methuselah. Do you want to, and I know this is just the beginning of sorrows, like they would say, do you really want to go? Of course, your fragility is going to lead to your death, but reincarnation, do you want to go through all that again? No, that's once was more than enough. So they say you've got to go to a completely higher level of being, ultimately even becoming a god, possibly, like the Mormons say. Well, yeah, it does take a genius to see that when you die, which is probably because of various ailments, you can't sustain that forever. So you're going to end up in heaven in a wheelchair? Well, according to the synoptics, yes. Right? It's better to enter into life maimed with one eye, missing a hand or a foot. Well, at least it's better than go into the fire of Gehenna, right? So somebody did think of it that way, but what a nuisance that would be. So, in fact, the zombies are the big thing in the horror field, right? Walking Dead, etc., etc. This strikes me as the most ludicrous of monsters. I mean, I can almost believe in Dracula or the reanimated Frankenstein or even the Wolfman, but at least it kind of makes sense. But the zombie, it's just the stinking corpse that is a corpse, because it was no longer functional. Like you're dead for a reason. The body is not working anymore. The mind is not working anymore. So into the junkyard with it. But in zombie movies, even though it's the same old heap of junk, it's now shambling around and digesting people's brains. It's just absurd. Not because it's supernatural, God forbid, but it's just like saying, I think I'm going to get a new car from the junkyard. It doesn't have any wheels, but what the heck? I can ignore that. No, you can't. The thing is a piece of junk, and that's why it's expired. That is the thinking in 1 Corinthians 15. It's like a zombie, and it's absurd. So what's the alternative? Well, you have a spiritual body that is fit for the rigors, if you want to call it that, or the lack of them, in heaven or on the millennial earth, whatever. It's got to be, because a flesh and blood body would simply continue to age and rot. So it makes perfect sense. So anybody that thinks about a resurrection is likely to say, well, it can't be the same body. And indeed, 1 Corinthians 15 says it will not be. Apologists love to translate as a natural body, but actually, and that's legit, but you can just as easily translate it as a physical body. And that seems to me to be better, since the contrast is with a spiritual body. The old one is sloughed off, and Richard Carrier does a great job explaining this in one of his essays in our collection, The Empty Tomb, Jesus Beyond the Grave. So that needn't be borrowed, but there were people that didn't realize it, like, again, the synoptics, you go to heaven missing limbs and all that. And in the Gospel of Luke, interestingly, where Jesus raised from the dead, it says they thought they were seeing a spirit, a ghost. And Jesus says, no, look, touch me and see it as I myself. No spirit has flesh and bones as you see that I do. Well, what did he think would happen in eternity with a fleshly body? Well, I think, especially since this is so close to the reunion scene in the life of Apollonius of Tyana, where he has just transported across the Mediterranean from the courtroom of the Emperor Domitian. And he's now meeting his disciples. They can't imagine he wasn't executed. And they're blown away, and they say, is it really you, or is it a spirit? Either way, we can't think of anything we'd like more than to see you again. And he says, no, I am not a ghost from Persephone's realm, the netherworld, whom she allows to come back and greet the bereaved relatives. He says, touch me and see. If I elude your grasp, all right, then I'm a ghost, but you'll see I have solid flesh. And it's okay, I guess you really are alive. I really have to wonder if, as some early Christians probably read it, that's not Luke's point, that Jesus didn't die. He cheated death rather than died and rose again. So I don't know if that Luke 24 thing even fits the discussion, but George Ladd, himself an evangelical apologist and a great New Testament scholar, I mean, he really deserves the label, he, in a book called I Believe in the Resurrection, surveys what we know of Jewish beliefs in the resurrection. And he said there's a whole range of them, from you're back in the same body, though you were really dead, or you come back in a kind of angelic body, or both. You come back from the grave in your physical body, but then like Enoch, you're transformed into an immortal form. And I think there were even a couple of other things. So unlike the pompous N.T. Wright, who says, oh yeah, there was a Jewish view of the body, and if you didn't believe that, you weren't a Jew, and so on. It's just bunk. He's just a text twister, as I like to call him. I nearly got into a fist fight with a guy at the Jesus seminar once over this. I said, Wright is just Jerry Falwell in a better suit. But you do have that contradiction between Luke 24 and 1 Corinthians 15, because Paul or whoever is saying the last Adam became a life-giving spirit. We share the form of the earthly Adam, but we will share the likeness of the heavenly Adam. So our resurrection body would not be a body of flesh and blood. How could it be? It could never survive eternity. I mentioned that to Craig, and he said that, well, no, flesh and blood just meant mortality. And I said, well, that's why it means mortality, because the flesh is going to die. The flesh is fragile, but he wanted to just ignore that. So he's ignoring the very thing that makes the analogy possible. He's excluding that from the definition. And it's just more trickery. It's just more sleight of hand.
Yeah, I've often noticed that Bill Craig seems to be full of, what do they call that? The bulls. Oh, gosh. Oh, anyway. My lame attempt at humor.
Join our Patreon